My name is Oliver Grayson, and before the night everything changed. I was just another guy working a job he hated to keep the heat on. I worked nights at a storage facility in Anchorage, Alaska. It wasn't glamorous, just long rows of metal lockers, a half-broken generator, and a cheap office trailer. But the graveyard shift paid extra, and I needed the money to support my 16-year-old sister, Leah. After our mom died and our dad disappeared from the picture, everything fell on me. I dropped out of college, took whatever job I could get, and started learning how fast bills piled up when there was no one else to help. Working nights never felt right. The place was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something was waiting. Metal walls creaked in the cold, snow scraped along the pavement, and the generator hummed like it was trying not to die. People stored strange things, too. Lifelike dolls, medical equipment, mannequins, things wrapped in tarps shaped like bodies. Nothing technically illegal, but nothing that helped the atmosphere either. Still, I pushed through every shift. Rent doesn't care how you feel. On January 17th, a storm rolled in. Thick snow, wind sharp enough to sting, air biting at any exposed skin. Half the outside lights flickered on and off like a dying heartbeat. The moment I stepped out of the office for nightly rounds, something in my chest tightened. I told myself it was the cold, but deep down, I knew better. I always started inspections at row A and worked my way back. Most doors were sealed tight, dusted with snow along the bottom edge. Everything was normal until I reached Unit 47B. The door wasn't shut. It sat open maybe 2 inches, just enough for cold air to seep through. Enough to tell me someone had been here recently. I crouched down, expecting to see some forgotten padlock or debris blocking closure. Instead, I saw light. A faint glow, like a phone screen. I straightened, heart thudding. "Hello?" I called. Silence stretched too long. Then, a whisper. Soft, strained. "Please, don't leave me here." I froze. People had accidentally gotten locked inside before. But this voice wasn't annoyed or embarrassed. It was terrified. I swallowed and forced myself to speak. "Ma'am, are you stuck? I can help." A pause. Then, barely audible, "He'll hear us." My skin prickled cold. I lifted the door slowly. It stuck at first, like something heavy pressed against it, but eventually it opened wide enough for me to squeeze inside. That's when I saw her. A woman sat on the concrete floor, wrists zip-tied, ankles taped, clothing torn in places where tape had been ripped away. Her cheeks were streaked with tears. A broken phone lay beside her. My voice cracked. "Who did this to you?" She shook her head sharply, as if answering might summon something. "He said he'd come back." A metallic clang echoed somewhere down the row, not wind. Footsteps. Someone had just returned. Fear lit up every nerve in my body. I pulled out the small pocket knife I carried for work and cut her restraints. My hands were shaking so badly that the blade slipped twice before the plastic finally snapped. "Can you walk?" I whispered. She nodded. Weak, but determined. We slipped out of the unit. I yanked the door shut, more instinct than strategy, and switched on my flashlight. That's when the power cut. Lights overhead flickered once, then everything went black. The generator must have failed. My flashlight became the only light in the storm-dark maze. We started toward the office, slow at first, trying not to make noise. Then, a man's voice echoed down the row, calm, cold. "Hey." We stopped. I turned, raising the flashlight beam. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a figure stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, hood up, something metallic hanging from his right hand. The woman beside me inhaled sharply. "That's him." He took another step. "She's coming with me." Something in me snapped. Not courage exactly, but instinct. I threw the flashlight, hard. The beam bounced across the asphalt, spinning wildly. The man recoiled just slightly, just enough. "Run!" I grabbed her arm. We sprinted, stumbling across ice patches and snowdrifts. The dark made everything disorienting. The same metal doors appeared over and over like a repeating nightmare. His footsteps followed. Not panicked, not rushed, just steady, as if he expected to catch us eventually. We tore around the last row of units and finally saw it, the faint glow of the office trailer through the snow. Relief surged until he stepped in front of us. This time, he was closer, too close. "You made this difficult," the woman whimpered. Without thinking, I lunged at him, not to fight, but to distract. I grabbed whatever I could, his coat maybe, and shoved as hard as I could. He slipped on ice, stumbled backward. It wasn't enough to stop him, but it bought us seconds. We sprinted toward the back corner of the fence, where snow had drifted high. I boosted her first. She scrambled over the metal, panting, hands raw from gripping the frozen chain links. I climbed next, legs shaking. Halfway up, the man's voice cut through the storm. No longer calm. "What did I tell you?" Then he screamed, "Get back here!" I dropped down the other side and ran, dragging her with me toward the main road. My lungs felt like they were freezing from the inside out. Somewhere behind us, he was still moving. But then, sirens. A chorus of them. Red and blue lights cut through the storm. He stopped running. We didn't. Not until officers surrounded us. Police swarmed the storage yard. Within minutes, they detained the man hiding between units. His name was Miles Rowan. A tenant with a history of violence the facility never bothered to screen. He had been using the storage unit for more than old furniture. They found evidence: zip ties, restraints, debris. That suggested she wasn't the first woman he'd brought there. I gave my statement over and over, first to officers, then detectives. The woman, her name was Melanie Hart, was taken into an ambulance. Before the doors closed, she whispered, "You saved my life." I didn't feel like a savior. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, my thoughts were scattered, my body was cold long after the storm passed. 2 days later, I quit. I didn't give 2 weeks, I didn't explain, I just walked away. Even after, I couldn't shake the feeling that storage units weren't just for belongings. Sometimes they were for secrets, and sometimes they were cages. Life moved forward the way life always does, whether you're ready or not. But fear doesn't leave that quickly. For weeks, I woke up thinking I heard footsteps on our porch. I checked the locks 3 times a night. Leah started leaving lights on, even though electricity was expensive. Eventually, the courtroom process began. I attended one major hearing. I didn't plan to, but something inside me needed closure, or maybe proof he was really behind bars. When they walked Rowan past the gallery in handcuffs, I expected rage or fear. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. He looked at me, but not like I'd beaten him. More like I had interrupted something he thought he had a right to finish. Then he looked away, expression empty. He wasn't a monster from stories. He wasn't a demon or a ghost. He was a person, and that was somehow worse. Melanie later told me, "I waited for someone to notice. I hoped someone would step in. Nobody did until you." I didn't feel heroic hearing it. But I understood something I hadn't before. Real danger isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Sometimes it walks quietly. Sometimes it waits behind a partially opened door. Sometimes the scariest threats aren't imagined. They're real, and they hide in plain sight. Bravery isn't fearlessness. It's acting despite fear. And the difference between tragedy and survival can come down to one moment. The moment someone chooses to say, people make bad decisions when they're exhausted. Mine was renting a room in a house I'd never heard of after a 14-hour shift. I'm Harper Lane, a medical assistant in Anchorage. That night, driving home wasn't an option. I felt the kind of fatigue where your vision blurs and thoughts come in fragments, not sentences. So I pulled up a booking app and scanned listings. Most places were booked. One remained. Willowmark House, basement suite available. Late check-in. The photos showed a blue Victorian home with white trim and a porch swing. Cozy, safe-looking, cheap. I booked it and drove through fog that clung to my windshield like breath. When I pulled up, the house looked older than the photos. Paint chipped in places, windows dark, the swing moving slightly though the air was still. Inside the entryway, a folded note sat on a small table. Room 1B, downstairs. Welcome. Ms. Callahan. A map would have helped, just not the word downstairs. I considered leaving, but I was too tired, and it was freezing. The basement door creaked loudly as I opened it. The stairwell smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic, like damp keys. My room was at the bottom of the stairs, a small space with a single bed, wooden dresser, kitchenette, and one small window showing nothing but soil and a sliver of concrete. The walls were painted white, though the paint had warped in places. A brass skeleton key lay on the bedside table with no explanation. Something about that key unsettled me immediately. Still, the bed didn't feel terrible, and my body felt heavier than fear. I unpacked, turned on my white noise machine, and finally closed my eyes. I drifted fast, too fast, and then, sometime later, a sound pierced through sleep. 3 knocks, deliberate, against the wall behind the dresser. My eyes snapped open. My digital watch showed 1:06 a.m. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Old building, settling pipes, wind. Then, it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, measured, waiting. My heart rate tripled. But I didn't move. I just listened. Silence finally returned, and for a moment, I convinced myself it was nothing. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and tried to breathe normally. Sleep didn't return. I turned on the lamp. The soft yellow light didn't make me feel better, but at least I could see the room clearly. That's when I noticed something I had ignored earlier. One section of the wall, behind the dresser, wasn't drywall. It was wooden planks. Old, uneven boards nailed vertically, darker than the surrounding wall as if moisture had seeped through for decades. The knocks had come from there. A faint memory surfaced, me as a child, trapped in my family's storm cellar after the latch jammed. Screaming until my throat hurt, convinced something breathed in the dark with me. I shook the memory away. Just a building, I whispered to myself. To prove something, maybe bravery, maybe denial. I moved closer. My phone had no signal. As I leaned in, I noticed something else. A rusted keyhole at the bottom of one plank. Exactly the size of the brass key. A wave of cold moved through me. Not physical cold, but instinctive. The kind that tells prey when a predator is near. I backed up. No, I murmured. Not doing this. I climbed back into bed and pulled the covers tight. For a while, there was nothing. No knocks, no movement. Eventually, exhaustion won. I woke again with no clear reason. This time it wasn't knocking. It was breathing. Slow, shallow. On the other side of the wall. I held my breath to confirm I wasn't hearing my own. The breathing continued, patterned, soft, and impossibly close. I slipped out of bed and crept toward the stairs. My plan was simple. Leave. I didn't care if I had to sleep in my car. But when I turned the basement door handle, it didn't move. Locked from the outside. My pulse slammed against my ribs. "Hello?" I called quietly. "Ms. Callahan?" No answer. The breathing grew louder, almost eager. Suddenly, the ventilation fan above me shut off. Just stopped. Instant silence. Then, a whisper through the cracks. "Please." I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my bag. Another whisper, closer, desperate. "Don't leave me here?" It sounded young, female. My throat tightened. I told myself it was a mistake, a prank, Something explainable. But deep down, some old childhood fear began to unspool inside me. I reached instinctively for the brass key in my pocket. My hand shook. I didn't remember putting it there. Something inside me whispered, "Don't use it." Something else whispered, "She needs help." Against everything logical, I walked toward the boarded wall. Up close, the boards looked even older, splintered, soft with age, stained darker near the bottom like water had pooled there once. My hands trembled as I knelt and lifted the key. For one long second I hesitated. Then I inserted it into the keyhole. It slid in as if it had always belonged there. A faint click echoed through the wood. The boards didn't open, but the whisper changed. Now it wasn't pleading. It was clear. "You opened it." The temperature in the room dropped. My breath fogged. A loud, violent bang hit the boards, so strong the dresser rattled. My scream ripped out before I could swallow it. I spun and sprinted up the stairs again, pounding on the locked door. "Help! Please!" Footsteps finally sounded overhead, slow, almost reluctant. The lock clicked. Ms. Callahan stood at the top of the stairs wearing a nightgown, expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" I gasped, pointing. "Someone's inside that wall. Someone alive, asking to be let out." Her face changed, but not to shock, to dread. She exhaled heavily. "I was hoping this wouldn't happen again." "Again?" She motioned me upstairs. I grabbed my bag and followed her, never turning my back fully to the basement. Once the door shut, she leaned against the wall like something heavy pressed on her. "That basement was renovated in the 50s, she began quietly. "A young woman renting here disappeared. Police searched the house. They found scratch marks behind those boards." My stomach turned. "They sealed it. Some say she was locked in. Others say she hid and couldn't get out." "Was she found?" Ms. Callahan shook her head. "No body, no explanation." I swallowed. "Then what did I hear?" She looked at me with tired eyes. "This house keeps echoes. Sometimes echoes learn to speak." I didn't argue. I just left. I drove until the sun rose, until the sky turned a shade of pink that felt unreal after the night I'd survived. I checked into a hotel 2 towns away. I sat under the hot shower until the water ran cold. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. What would I say? I heard someone who shouldn't exist whisper through a sealed wall. Sleep eventually returned, but lightly, hovering, never deep, and sometimes still, when I wake abruptly, heart racing. My watch shows the same numbers. 1:06 a.m. Once, half asleep, I thought I heard a soft knock against my bedroom wall. Just 3 taps, even, patient. I didn't look. I just turned on the lamp and stayed awake until sunrise. Now, when people ask why I avoid basements, I joke. But the truth is simpler. Some doors, once opened, even just a little, never fully close again. Trust your instincts. Fear isn't always irrational. Sometimes it's a warning shaped by experience and survival. When something feels wrong and every part of you wants to leave, listen. Not every voice seeking release should be freed, and not every locked door was made to be opened. I never used to think of fear as something quiet. When I was younger, fear was loud. Shouting, slammed doors, a stranger's footsteps in the hallway. Years ago, someone broke into my apartment while I slept. They didn't touch me or take anything, but the sound of them moving through the dark stayed with me longer than anything that did happen. Since then, unfamiliar places never feel entirely safe. Hotels, especially. My work requires travel, archival research for historical collections, and while I love my job, the nights on the road are never restful. Still, nothing prepared me for what happened in Charleston. The Larkswell Harbor Hotel was one of those old buildings that tried to disguise its age with new carpet and updated fixtures. When I checked in, the lobby was nearly empty. Just a front desk clerk who looked too tired to pretend enthusiasm. "You're in room 304, he said, sliding a keycard across the counter. "End of the hall." "Quiet is good?" I joked. He hesitated. Not long enough to seem suspicious, but long enough for me to notice. "Yeah," he said. "It's quiet." The third floor felt older than the lobby. The air smelled faintly musty beneath artificial lemon. Brick walls lined the corridor, and the lights flickered once as I reached my door. Room 304 was simple. Bed, desk, minibar, neutral art. Nothing unusual except the connecting door. A small placard on it read, "Room 302, vacant, maintenance." I told myself it didn't matter. I'd seen hundreds of hotel connecting doors. Still, I noticed it. By midnight, I'd reviewed my notes, answered emails, and gone through my routine of checking locks twice. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep. Around 12:40 a.m. Just as I drifted off, I heard it. A knock. Soft. Close. Not at the hallway door. At the connecting door. I sat up. My first thought was hotel staff. Wrong room mix-up. Maybe someone thought the suite was open. Then came a second knock. Slower. More deliberate. I swallowed hard and picked up my phone. Calling the front desk made me feel ridiculous, but something in the knock felt wrong. Too intentional. The clerk answered, sounding half awake. "Hi," I said quietly. "Sorry, but I think someone is trying to get into room 302. I'm next door and I hear knocking on the connecting door." A pause. "Ma'am," he said finally, "room 302 is empty. Locked. No one has access tonight." I forced a laugh. "Great. Just wanted to check." "Old buildings carry sound," he added. "Try to get some rest." I hung up. Checked the hallway peephole just in case. Nothing. The hall was still. I went back to bed. 2 minutes later, I heard something that made every muscle tighten. A cough. A man's cough. Not distant, not filtered through walls or floors, right behind the connecting door. The sound was followed by silence. Heavy, waiting silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Morning made everything feel stupid. Sunlight always does that. Turns terror into imagination. I told myself exhaustion exaggerates things. At the archives, surrounded by quiet stacks of documents and the soft tapping of keyboards, last night felt far away. I convinced myself I'd imagined the cough, or misunderstood the sound. By late evening, I returned to the hotel exhausted enough to believe I'd sleep. I didn't. At 2:03 a.m., I woke suddenly, not from a sound, but from the abrupt feeling that something changed in the room. Then, the noise came. A low, dragging scrape, slow and heavy, like furniture being pushed across bare wood. It was coming from room 302. I sat up, heart hammering. The sound continued in intervals. Drag, pause, drag again, until it shifted into something else. Tapping. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Same rhythm. Not random. Not mechanical. Intentional. My breathing tightened. I stared at the connecting door, half expecting the handle to move. I called the front desk again. "Room 304, I whispered. "Something is happening in the room next to me. 302. There are noises. Furniture moving. Someone tapping." The clerk sounded tense now, less dismissive, more cautious. "No one has checked in," he said, "and maintenance hasn't entered that room in months." Months. So, how is furniture moving? He cleared his throat. "Some guests have reported echoes. It's an old building." His voice sounded practiced, like he'd said the line many times. I hung up. I stared at the connecting door. The tapping stopped. Silence filled the room, deep and deliberate. Then, ever so lightly, the handle of the connecting door twitched. Not fully, just enough to let me know someone or something was on the other side. That was enough. I grabbed my bag, shoved everything inside without folding it, and left the room. The hallway was colder than before, not AC cold, but still draftless cold. As I hurried toward the elevator, I heard a sound behind me, a soft click. The connecting door latch, opening. Though I was no longer in the room to hear it directly, I didn't look back. Downstairs, I asked for a different room. The clerk didn't argue. He just handed me another key card with a quiet, knowing nod. I didn't sleep much in the new room, but nothing strange happened. When morning finally came, I left for work relieved, but uneasy. As I walked down the third-floor hallway, I saw 2 maintenance workers unlocking room 302. The door was open just enough for me to see inside. The room was empty. No bed, no dresser, no curtains, no lamps, no carpet. Just bare floorboards and scarred trim. Long dark gouges lined the baseboards, deep scratches like something had clawed or dragged against the walls repeatedly. The connecting door appeared warped, bowing outward slightly, as if pressure had pushed from the inside for years. One worker muttered to the other, unaware I was close enough to hear. "Third guest this month." The other sighed. "They should have sealed this room off years ago." I stepped back, heart pounding. The nearest worker turned and met my eyes. "You were in 304? I nodded. He gave a small, grim nod. "Don't take rooms with a connecting door," he said. "Not here, not anywhere." Something in his tone told me he'd seen more than scratched floors. That afternoon, while working in the archives, I couldn't stop thinking about the room. Curiosity overpowered dread. I searched the hotel's name online. Buried beneath ordinary reviews were forum posts, strange ones. "Anyone ever hear noises from 302? Stayed next to it. Never again. Something tried the connecting door all night." Then one comment chilled me. "Blueprints from the original building show no guest room there. That space used to be a sealed maintenance chamber after a missing person case in the early 90s. Records show the door was welded shut. New ownership renovated, opened it again. Guests started complaining immediately." The thread stopped there. No conclusion, no explanation. Just enough to confirm something was wrong, and someone already knew. That night was my last in Charleston. I debated checking out early, but exhaustion kept me in place. Around 1:47 a.m., I woke again, not to sound, but to a familiar feeling, being watched. Not physically, but intentionally. The room was silent, but the stillness felt too heavy to be empty. Then, so faint I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. It wasn't coming from the walls. It wasn't coming from the floor above. It was coming from somewhere deeper. Memory? Or something that had moved with me? I whispered, barely audible, "Leave me alone." Silence. Then, a single soft knock, like acknowledgement. I left before sunrise. 2 days after returning home, a padded envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, no handwriting. Inside was one item, a hotel key card, room number printed clearly, 302. I threw it out. But sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet and the dark feels too heavy, I hear it again. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. Like a knock waiting for a door that no longer exists, or one I still carry. Always trust the instinct that warns you before logic tries to reason it away. Some places, and some doors, were never meant to be opened. I've spent most of my adult life staring into the dark through a camera lens. Some people assume night photography means patience, quiet, peace. They picture stars hanging over still lakes and maybe a barn owl gliding past. But the truth is, the dark isn't peaceful. It's unpredictable. It hides things you tell yourself aren't there. My name is Marissa Hale, and I'm still not sure whether the worst part of what happened was that something was inside the lighthouse with us, or that part of me knew it before we even stepped inside. My fear of isolation started when I was a kid. My father once took my older brother Tom and me to Lake Superior during a winter storm. The waves were enormous, slamming against icy rocks. While my father packed up the car, I stared across the frozen ridge and saw someone standing there. No coat, no movement, just standing. When I blinked, the figure was gone. My dad laughed it off. Tom acted like he didn't see anything, but the look he gave me told me he had. That moment never left me, so when I got assigned to photograph nocturnal wildlife on the northern coast of Scotland, I did something unprofessional. I brought Tom with me. "It's work," he said, grinning as he tossed clothes into a duffel. "Not a survival expedition." "It's remote," I told him. "Very remote." "Yeah," he responded. "That's the point." I forced a smile, but deep down, I didn't want to do it alone. The lighthouse sat at the end of a narrow causeway, waves crashing on both sides, wind blasting the car as if trying to push it back. By the time we parked, rain hammered the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. Tom killed the engine and raised an eyebrow. Well, charming. I wanted to tell him we should go back to town, but the job wasn't optional. We walked the last 100 feet to the lighthouse door, which was cracked open. Not damaged, not rusted, just open. I froze. Tom nudged it gently. Probably left ajar by maintenance. Except, according to the listing, no one worked here. I stepped inside anyway. The first room smelled like seawater and damp stone. Shadows stretched longer than they should have, and everything felt colder than the storm outside. On a metal desk sat a logbook, its pages warped from moisture. The newest entry was short, written 3 days earlier. "He's inside again." Tom exhaled sharply, almost a laugh. "Okay, creepy, but probably just a joke." "Who would joke out here?" I whispered. He didn't answer. We explored the living area, the small kitchen, and storage rooms. Everything looked abandoned, but not untouched. Cupboards rattled now and then. No wind, no vibration. By 11 p.m., the storm worsened. Our radios picked up static, then something rhythmic, like metal tapping metal. Tom fiddled with the settings. "It's interference. There are no buoys near shore," I told him. He stopped messing with the tuning. I set up my camera facing the cliffs outside a narrow window. Through the lens, the storm looked almost artistic. Blurred rain, distant lightning, the causeway disappearing into darkness. Then I saw him, a man in a long coat, standing at the far end of the causeway, still, facing the lighthouse. My chest tightened. I pulled the camera from my face. The causeway was empty. Tom moved beside me. "What did you see?" "Nothing," I lied. But I already felt something shift, like the building exhaled. Minutes later, the temperature dropped fast. Our breath turned visible in the hallway. Tom grabbed a flashlight. "Generator must be failing." He disappeared down the stairs toward the maintenance room. The silence stretched until his shout echoed upward. "Marissa, someone open the storm hatch!" I ran to meet him halfway down the stairwell. "The hatch?" I asked. "Why, it opens from the inside," he said quietly. That's when we heard it. Footsteps. Slow, wet, coming up the stairs. Not frantic, not rushed. Like whoever it was knew exactly where we were and didn't need to hurry. Tom motioned upward. "Go!" We climbed fast, sealing the basement door behind us. The footsteps paused on the opposite side, then stopped completely. We stood in total darkness. No generator hum, no working lights, just the storm outside and our unsteady breaths. Then the radio crackled. Not static, not tapping. A voice, soft, strained. "Don't go downstairs." I stared at Tom. "Please tell me that was you." He shook his head. I lifted my camera again. Not to take a photo, but because looking through it made me feel strangely less exposed. In the center of the stairwell was empty air. Until I adjusted focus. A figure was climbing. Not walking, pulling itself up, hand over hand, like someone exhausted or broken. The skin was pale and waterlogged, like flesh left in the ocean too long. I blinked. Without the camera, the space looked empty again, but the footsteps resumed, faster this time. We had one option: up. We climbed into the lantern room and barricaded the hatch with whatever we could. Wind shook the windows, lightning illuminated the sea. The walls shuddered under the force of it. Then something slammed into the hatch. Once. Again. Harder. The third hit cracked the wood. "We need to move!" Tom yelled. "There's nowhere to go!" He pulled open the emergency exit onto the tiny balcony. Wind nearly took the door off its hinges. Behind us, the hatch splintered. We crawled outside, gripping the railing, bodies pressed against cold metal. The lantern room door burst open. A figure stepped into the light. Tall, drenched, head tilted unnaturally. The coat hanging from its body looked old, salt-eaten, torn, almost fused to the skin beneath. It didn't follow us out. Instead, it watched, silent, unmoving, like it had been waiting years for someone to notice it. Tom found an exterior maintenance ladder. We climbed, wind nearly peeling us from the tower until our feet hit wet rock. We ran. I didn't look back. Not until we reached the car. The lantern light flashed once, slow, sweeping the cliff line. In its beam, just for a second, another shadow moved beside the first. Then everything went dark. We drove until the lighthouse disappeared from view. Neither of us spoke until we reached town. Even then, the words felt wrong in our mouths, like whatever we saw didn't belong in daylight. The next morning, we went to the local Coast Guard office. When we mentioned the name, the officer frowned. "That station's been shut down 5 years," he said. "No staff, no approved access." "There was a booking platform online," I insisted. "A man named Miles, no one by that name works in this region," he replied. He opened a record book, turning it toward us. There, under 998, was a photograph of a man in a lighthouse keeper's coat. His face was familiar, not because I'd seen it in life, but because I had seen it staring back at me through broken glass. Miles Rutherford, missing at sea. Storm incident. Body unrecovered. Tom swallowed hard. "So someone broke in after it closed?" The officer hesitated, a long moment, before saying, "You're not the first to report unusual activity there." He didn't elaborate. We didn't ask. We left Scotland 2 days early. I returned the equipment. I told my editors the storm ruined the shoot. Technically, that wasn't a lie, but I didn't mention the man on the causeway, or the voice over the radio, or the hands pulling up the stairs. And I definitely didn't mention the final photograph that showed up on a flash drive recovered from the lighthouse. One image, blurry staircase, a pale figure halfway up, and beside it, something gripping the railing, a hand, long, swollen, fingers wrapped tight around rusted metal. But the worst part wasn't the hand. It was the reflection, barely visible in the polished steel. A face, not his, mine. And behind my reflection, something else standing just inches away. Watching, waiting. Months have passed, but I still dream about the stairwell, the wet footsteps, the cold air, the radio message. Sometimes I wake gasping, convinced someone is standing just outside the bedroom door. Sometimes I can almost hear water dripping. I stopped night photography. Tom refuses to discuss it. But the part that haunts me most isn't what I saw. It's the feeling that we weren't chased out. We were allowed to leave. And whatever was inside that lighthouse, it wasn't finished. People tell stories about fresh starts like they're clean and beautiful. New keys, new house, new habits, new life. But real starting over is not clean. It's fear with a new address. It's checking the locks twice. It's learning how to sleep without bracing for footsteps. My name is Rachel Moore, and I moved to the coast because I didn't know where else to go. My 2 daughters, Lily and Emma, didn't understand why we left so suddenly. I told them we needed a better school district, a safer neighborhood, somewhere with ocean air and quiet streets. The truth was uglier. We left because of Matthew Carter, my ex-fiancé, a man everyone loved until they really knew him. When I met him, I was young and lonely, convinced attention meant love. He told me I was special, chosen. That word seduced me. Over time, his compliments became instructions. Instructions became rules. Rules became punishments. He isolated me from friends, then family, then my own identity. When I left the first time, he cried. The second time, he screamed. The third, he promised to ruin me. The fourth time, I didn't tell him I was leaving. 6 months later, I heard he drowned during a storm offshore. His boat washed up. He didn't. People said it was closure. I wanted to believe them. Our new rental house sat near a quiet pier, close enough to hear waves, but far enough that the world felt smaller. Salt clung to the windows, floors creaked. But there was no yelling, no slammed doors, no footsteps pacing the hallway at night. The girls relaxed. I tried to. I found work at Dockside Diner, a late-night spot where fishermen, truckers, and insomniacs came for coffee and warmth. The neon sign flickered. The booths were cracked vinyl, and everything smelled like fryer oil. But there was comfort in routine. Most nights, I cleaned in silence. The ocean fog would crawl in slow, thick, like breath against glass. One night, that fog felt heavier, like it wasn't just weather, but warning. I was closing early. The diner was empty except for the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the dock outside. Then the bell over the door chimed. A man walked in. He was tall. His posture was stiff, unnatural. Water dripped from a long, gray coat, as if he'd risen from the ocean. In his hand, white roses, ruined and wilted. His eyes locked onto mine, and something inside me recoiled so violently my breath stuttered. He didn't sit like a tired customer or speak like someone placing an order. He simply slid into a booth and watched me with a faint smile, one I knew without understanding why. I tried to shake it off, wiped one last table, and went to flip the door sign to closed. Except it already said, open. I had flipped it. I remembered doing it. My chest tightened. I turned slowly. The man was still sitting, still smiling. A single rose now lay on the table in front of him. I hadn't seen him move. My voice felt thin. We're closed. He finally spoke. I came to see you, Rachel. My stomach dropped. No stranger should know my name. I stepped back. Who are you? He lifted his wrist, pushing back his wet coat sleeve. A tattoo, crescent moon, 3 stars. A tattoo I used to trace while convincing myself bruises were accidents. My voice cracked. Matthew? His smile widened. You left so suddenly. I ran. I didn't grab my bag. I didn't turn off lights. I just shoved through the back exit and bolted across the pier. Fog swallowed everything. The boards under my feet felt endless. Behind me, slow, wet footsteps. Not running, not hurrying, following. A patrol boat cut through the fog with a bright spotlight. The footsteps stopped. When I turned, the pier was empty. Only the roses remained, scattered behind me like a trail. The next morning, the world tried to act normal. Sunlight, seagulls, school morning chaos. But something in me knew normal was over. I told myself exhaustion, trauma, and late-night fear had blurred reality. Until Lily pointed at the front window after school. Mom, someone left this. A perfect white rose, dry, fresh. Not one from the ruined bouquet. Under it, a small folded note. My hands shook opening it. You can move, but I will always find you. My breath broke. I went straight to the police. Officer Torres, young but steady, listened carefully as I spoke. When I asked for proof of Matthew's death, he searched the records. Frowning, he said, "There's no drowning report, no recovered body, no death certificate." I stared at him. "That's impossible." He gently asked if trauma could be affecting memory, if I could be misinterpreting someone else's behavior. His tone wasn't cruel, it was cautious. I understood why, but I knew what I saw. As I left, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, breathing, then a whisper, telling them won't help. Over the next days, fear became routine. I checked locks twice, slept with lights on, triple-checked the girls' windows. Then, the dreams began. Not chaotic nightmares, no monsters, no screaming. Just Matthew standing at the end of my bed, still, watching. His coat dripped water onto the floor. His voice echoed in my head. "You left me alone in the dark." I woke one morning to wet footprints leading down the hallway. Human footprints, leading to my daughter's room. The window, latched the night before, was open. Emma slept peacefully, clutching a small white rose. I pulled it from her hand, trying not to shake. She stirred. "He said it was for you." I forced my voice steady. "Did he touch you?" She shook her head. "No, he just watched me, like he was waiting." I called Torres again. He searched, again. No evidence. No prints, no disturbance. Nothing indicates forced entry. "But there was someone," I insisted. He hesitated. Trauma can make the familiar feel present, even when it's not. I wanted to scream. I wanted someone to believe me, but fear makes you quiet. After he left, my phone vibrated. A text message. "You shouldn't have told him." 3 nights later, at 1:09 a.m., the doorbell rang. Not frantic, not accidental. 3 soft, spaced chimes. My phone buzzed. "Open the door." I didn't move. His voice came through the wood. "Rachel, it's rude to ignore guests." Glass shattered at the back of the house. Wet footsteps entered. Moving slowly, purposefully. I grabbed the girls, rushed them to the basement, locked the door. Footsteps stopped outside. Silence. Then a soft scrape, like a fingertip drifting down the door. My phone buzzed. A picture. My staircase. Taken from inside the house minutes earlier. A shadow at the bottom step. Him. I don't remember dialing 911, but sirens eventually cut through the night. Police searched, and again, no body, no roses, no footprints. Only one detail remained. A single wet fingerprint beside the basement lock. We moved again. Far inland, away from water. I changed phone numbers, cameras, locks, routines. For a while, weeks, life smoothed out. The girls laughed again. I started to sleep. But trauma doesn't heal in silence. It waits. Then, one afternoon, there was mail in the box. No return address. Inside, a photo. My daughter's. Walking home from school. On the back, in the handwriting I once loved. Still mine. That night, as the wind rattled the windows, I stood in the dark of our living room staring at the glass. At first, there was nothing. Then, a figure appeared across the street. Tall, gray coat dripping, holding white roses. Not moving, not hiding, watching, waiting, not alive, but not gone. And I finally understood. Some loves don't die. Some obsessions don't fade. Some ghosts are made long before the body fails. Matthew wasn't haunting my house. He was haunting me. Leaving someone abusive doesn't end the story. Standing against them does. Fear is powerful, but it isn't final. No matter who chases you, real or remembered, you are not theirs. You are not owned. Healing begins the moment you choose yourself, even if your voice shakes while saying, "I am free." I never planned on becoming a night shift security guard in an underground parking structure. Life didn't break all at once, just gradually, quietly, until I ended up doing a job no one dreams about. Before the parking garage, I worked as an EMT in Reno. I was good at it. My evaluations always said the same thing. Calm under pressure, strong instincts, reliable. I believed that meant I could handle anything. Then came one call that rewired me from the inside. It was a winter evening 3 years ago. Dispatch sent us to a cheap motel off Virginia Street. Possible overdose. Calls like that were routine. We carried Narcan, oxygen, syringes. We knew the steps by heart. Most of the time, we got there in time. This one was different. We found a teenager curled on a motel bathroom floor, barely older than 16. His skin was pale bluish, his breathing shallow and wet, like every inhale hurt. His hands trembled. His eyes stared past us at nothing. My partner administered Narcan while I started compressions. His ribs felt too thin under my palms. We worked until sweat covered my face and my arms went numb. But he never came back. When the coroner zipped the body bag and rolled him away, reality didn't hit like a scream. It hit like a whisper. A quiet realization that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you lose. That night I went home and couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him staring through me. After that, small spaces made me anxious. Bathrooms especially. Stairwells, locked rooms, elevators. I felt trapped. My chest tightened. My breath shortened. I lasted 6 more months. Then I walked out mid-shift and didn't return. The security job wasn't glamorous, but it fit what I needed. Something predictable, something without sirens or blood or decisions that determined whether someone lived or died. Just cameras, concrete, and silence. The building belonged to an insurance company, once busy, now mostly abandoned. Offices on the upper floors collected dust. Only a handful of employees came during the day. At night, it was empty except for me and the echo of my own footsteps. The garage underneath had 4 underground levels, B1 through B4. B1 and B2 still held employee cars. B3 sometimes had a couple government vehicles. B4 rarely had anything. I hated B4 from day one. Something about it felt wrong. Too still, too damp, too cold. Water dripped there constantly, though maintenance swore the pipes were sealed. You could hear the water echo across the concrete like a slow, steady heartbeat. But the job was simple. Patrol twice a shift. Log anything unusual, report trespassers. No emergencies, no pressure, no kids dying in my hands. It should have been easy. It happened in February, one of those Nevada winter nights where the air feels sharp and the wind whistles between buildings like something alive. The shift had been quiet. I sat in the control room watching 42 camera feeds while drinking terrible coffee. Then, at 3:11 a.m., my radio hissed with static. Not unusual. The signal always weakened underground. But then, under the static, came a voice, a strained whisper. "Down here, please." My stomach tightened. Not fear exactly, just the feeling of something shifting beneath calm water. I pressed the mic. "Control to any unit on premises. Identify." Silence. I checked the cameras. Nothing. Just still, empty corridors of cement. Protocol required me to investigate. I strapped on my flashlight and badge and took the ramp downward. B1, clear. B2, clear. B3, different. On the east wall was a dark smear, long, thin, slick-looking. Oil, maybe, but something about it felt too fresh, too wet. I tried radioing again. Nothing but static. I should have gone back upstairs, but I kept going. The second I stepped onto B4, the air changed. The temperature dropped fast. Moisture coated the floor, reflecting the overhead lights like shallow water. I called out, "Security, if you're down here, respond." Only my echo answered. I walked between rows of government sedans, identical cars lined in identical spaces. The further I went, the louder the dripping became. Then my radio crackled again. Not words this time, just coughing. Deep, wet coughing, like someone choking on water. "Hey!" I shouted. voice sharper than I intended. "If you're injured, call out. I can help you." Silence. Then metal scraped across concrete somewhere ahead. My flashlight beam trembled slightly as I moved toward the sound. Halfway down the row, the overhead lights flickered. The far end of the garage plunged into darkness for a second, just long enough for my heart to hammer into my throat. When the lights returned, something had changed. One of the sedan trunks, definitely shut moments earlier, now sat open about 6 inches. I whispered, "No, that wasn't open." I forced myself forward, each step echoing. Right as I neared it, the trunk slammed shut with a violent bang. The sound echoed so loudly it felt like a physical impact. My breath shook. I backed away slowly. That's when I saw them. Wet footprints. Bare footprints. Human. They led from the darker end of the garage toward the emergency stairwell. Each print glistened with water reflecting the overhead light. "Okay," I said out loud, though no one was there. "Someone's in here. I just need to get eyes on them." But my voice wasn't steady. My hands weren't steady. The last time I felt like that was the motel bathroom. The same tight chest, the same trapped feeling. I headed toward the stairwell control panel so I could shut access and lock down the level until police arrived. But when I reached it, the panel hung open. Wires dangled loose, cut intentionally. Whoever was here knew what they were doing. Behind me, footsteps. Slow. Uneven. Dragging. I turned fast, flashlight sweeping wide. Nothing, just concrete, cars, dripping water. Then my radio erupted. No static this time, just one broken sentence. "Don't leave me again." The voice sounded close. Too close. Something inside me snapped. Fear, memory, instinct. All tangled. I ran. The elevator was open when I reached it, as if waiting. For a second, I hesitated. Elevators and enclosed spaces still bothered me. My chest tightened at the thought of the doors closing with no escape. But staying there felt worse. I stepped inside and hit the ground-level button. The doors shut. The ride up was slow, slower than usual. My reflection in the steel wall looked pale, eyes wide. For a moment, I swear I heard breathing beside me, not loud, just soft and struggling. When the doors finally opened, I nearly stumbled out. I didn't stop until I reached the lobby. Then I called police. The officers arrived within minutes. I explained everything, from the footprints to the radio transmissions. One of them gave me a careful look, not disbelief exactly, more like concern. They searched every floor. They found the footprints exactly where I reported them. Clear, wet impressions leading toward the maintenance grate beside the stairwell. The footprints stopped abruptly at the grate. Inside, officers recovered. Torn fabric. A small broken radio transmitter, rust flakes, and diluted traces of blood. But no person. No explanation. Nothing that made sense. One officer, older, tired, glanced at the security panel and said, "Sometimes people get trapped down here. Maintenance forgets them. Homeless get inside. Delusions happen. Water, darkness, isolation, it does things." Maybe he believed that. Maybe he needed to. I resigned 3 days later. My supervisor barely looked surprised. "Night shift's not for everyone," he said. Nothing personal. But it felt personal. Because somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't running from the building. I was running from the part of myself that froze when someone needed help. Again. Months passed. I avoided parking structures, avoided elevators, avoided thinking about what happened. One afternoon, while driving near downtown, I saw the old building again. A new guard leaned against the wall outside, smoking. I rolled down my window. "How's the job?" I asked, casually. He shrugged. "Easy. Quiet. Except every once in a while, the radios start talking on their own down in B4. Probably wiring issues." He shrugged again like it meant nothing, like it was harmless. As I pulled away, I heard the faintest whisper through his radio. Just a breath, just a rasp, but unmistakable. That same sound I still heard sometimes when I couldn't sleep. A tired voice reaching from somewhere cold and dark. Please, don't leave. I didn't look back, but the shaking in my hands returned. Trauma never leaves cleanly. Some part of me is still on B4, standing in the cold, wet silence of that garage, hearing someone call for help and not knowing whether I failed them once or twice. You can leave a place behind, but you can't outrun the parts of yourself you refuse to face. Until you confront what broke you, it will follow, quiet, patient, waiting where the lights flicker and fear has nowhere else to go. Long before I ever stepped foot on old Pier 9, I thought nothing about the ocean or the night could unsettle me. I grew up with the sea in my blood. My father was a fisherman, and my younger sister, Lily, practically lived on the water with me until the night an unexpected storm took her life. After that, silence and darkness became familiar. Painful, but familiar. By the time I turned 44, I worked night shifts without flinching. Empty parking lots, closed shopping centers, silent construction sites. None of them bothered me. So when Harborline Logistics offered me a contract as a night security guard on the docks, I figured it'd be like every other job. Lonely, quiet, easy money. The only thing different was old Pier 9. The company told me it was newly leased, still under renovation, and needed security until the rest of the lighting and electrical systems were finished. They liked hiring seasoned guards, people who wouldn't panic over shadows or stray cats. They never mentioned the collapse of Warehouse C years ago. They never mentioned the bodies. The first time I walked that pier, I felt it in my bones. Something wasn't right. The place smelled like stale salt, rust, and something old left too long underwater. Half the buildings had fresh paint, but others still carried the scars of storms, broken beams, and abandoned equipment fused together by years of neglect. Still, I told myself fear was just memory, Lily's memory, and I clocked in. My shift routine was simple. Walk the pier twice every hour. Check locked doors. Log anything unusual. Most nights were quiet except for the wind groaning through metal siding and gulls screaming out over black water. But everything changed during my fourth shift. At 12:23 a.m., I heard footsteps. Heavy, wet, dragging. Coming from Warehouse C, the one sealed with warning tape and padlocks. The footsteps didn't sound like wildlife. They sounded human. Probably a trespasser, I muttered and unhooked my flashlight. I approached the rusted gate and hesitated. The padlock was still closed, untouched. I scanned the shadows and listened. The footsteps stopped. Then came another sound. Something being dragged. Slow, heavy, wet. "Security!" I called out. "This area's restricted." Nothing answered. Against better judgment, I unlocked the gate. The motion sensors inside flickered on, one by one, weak and late, throwing jittery shadows along the corridor. The air was colder inside, damp and thick with the smell of mildew. I moved forward. About 20 feet in, I stopped dead. A single boot print, large, soaked, and fresh, sat in the middle of the dusty concrete. Just one, no prints leading to it. None leading away. My pulse kicked hard. My flashlight buzzed, flickered, and then went black. "Not funny," I whispered. When it finally blinked back to life, there was someone standing at the far end of the hall. A man. He wore an old yellow dock worker's raincoat, torn on one sleeve, dripping water that pooled around his boots. "Sir," I called, voice cracking, "you need to identify yourself." He didn't move except for his head turning just enough to suggest he heard me, but not enough to show his face. I took one step back. Another sound echoed behind me, another boot scraping across the floor. I spun around. No one, but another wet footprint appeared, then another, forming a slow, deliberate circle around me. My radio hissed to life with static, sharp, fizzing, like water drowning out a signal. Then a voice whispered through the speaker, "Marcel, don't leave me." My blood turned to ice. It was Lily's voice. I don't remember dropping my flashlight, but the clang echoed through the empty warehouse like a warning bell. Panic shot through me and instinct took over. I ran, fast, toward the exit gate. Behind me, something moved. Heavy footsteps, slow, limiting, but closing in. Just as I reached the gate, the overhead lights died, leaving only the red glow of the exit sign behind me. I slammed the gate shut and fumbled the lock until it clicked. When I finally turned back, chest heaving, the warehouse corridor was dark until a shape appeared. The same man. Raincoat hanging off his shoulders, head tilted, staring straight at me through the gate. He hadn't walked. He hadn't stepped. He was just suddenly there. Water dripped from him, forming a puddle that slowly crawled toward the dock's edge as if pulled by a tide. I didn't stay long enough to test the reality of it. I sprinted across the pier, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the night. Inside my small portable office, I locked the door and watched the surveillance monitors. Warehouse C corridor was empty. No man, no water, no footprints, no shadow. Just me, earlier, walking in and then running out. Alone. At some point, exhaustion took over and I dozed in the chair. When I woke, the sun had just touched the horizon and the pier looked normal again. Boring, harmless, painfully ordinary. I left without finishing my shift. I quit the next morning. When the supervisor asked for a reason, I told him I was having respiratory issues. The closest lie I could manage while my voice shook. That should have been the end of it, but 1 month later, I sat in a small diner by the harbor sipping burnt coffee when 2 older dock hands sat at the booth behind me. "You hear they're finally reopening Warehouse C?" one said. "About time," the other replied, though the story about the missing guy still gives me the creeps. My stomach tightened. "Missing?" the first man asked. "Yeah, one of the workers trapped in the collapse. 3 died, they recovered 2. 1 never showed up. Some say he drowned in the foundation pits. They dragged the water for days. All they ever found was a torn railing and a badge." "What about his raincoat?" "Never found." A chill rolled down my spine. I didn't turn around. I didn't ask questions. I paid my bill and walked out, hands trembling. That night, I dreamed. Chapter 5. In the dream, I was walking Old Pier 9 again. The air was heavy and the water was black as tar. The warehouse gates were gone, wide open like a mouth waiting. I tried to turn away, but my feet kept moving forward. Inside, the corridor glowed faintly, water pooling along the floor. The same yellow raincoat figure stood with his back to me, but this time, he wasn't alone. Shadows, dozens of them, watched from the walls, from the door frames, from the ceiling. Their faces blurred, soaked, silent. My throat felt tight. "Why me?" I whispered. The man lifted his head. When he spoke, it wasn't just his voice. It was every drowned voice layered together, carrying years of grief. "You heard us." He took 1 step closer, water sloshing around his boots. "You remember." Another step. "You stay." The last word echoed, not from the corridor, but from behind me. I turned. Lily stood there, but she wasn't the warm, laughing little sister from memory. Her clothes dripped seawater. Her skin looked pale, swollen. Her eyes, once bright, were cloudy and distant. "Don't go," she whispered. I woke drenched in sweat, heart racing, sheets tangled around me like nets. The room was quiet, except a single wet boot print sat by my bedroom door. No trail leading in, no trail leading out, just one. People assume burnout looks dramatic, shaking hands, crying in parking lots, shattered nerves. Mine wasn't loud. It was numbness. After 8 years as a paramedic, I stopped reacting to things that should have hurt. Calls blurred into each other until even tragedy lost its definition. The last call I ever responded to was a single car accident. 19-year-old kid, no blood, no chaos, just stillness. I held his wrist longer than necessary, waiting for a pulse I knew wouldn't return. Something in me shut off. Not broken, just done. I left the job within a month. I moved to Tillamook, Oregon, hoping distance would help. I needed work, something quiet, predictable. Nothing like flashing lights and strangers screaming for help. That's how I ended up working nights at Whispering Pines Stop and Go, a half-abandoned convenience store off Highway 47. Dana, my manager, handed me keys and paperwork and said, "Night shift's easy. Just don't open the door after closing. We've had drifters before." I nodded. I dealt with worse. The place was run down, flickering fluorescents, humming refrigerators, and aisles that looked untouched for days. The parking lot had 6 lamps. Only 4 worked. Beyond them stretched empty road, field, and dark. It wasn't comforting, but it was quiet. On my 9th shift at 10:50 p.m., I stepped outside to dump trash and noticed a man standing under the farthest lamp. Still, facing the store. At first I assumed he was waiting for a ride, but he didn't move. Not when wind whipped trash past his feet. Not when a car passed on the highway. He just stood there, hands at his sides, posture rigid. Something instinctive tightened in me. Not fear, exactly. Just awareness. Back inside, I locked the door from habit more than worry. The man remained in my peripheral vision while I worked. Every time I looked up, he was still there. Not pacing, not smoking, just watching. By midnight, the silence of the shift wasn't calming. It felt stretched thin. At 12:18, a couple stopped for snacks. Their chatter filled the store briefly, breaking the tension. When they left, I watched their car pull away, hoping the headlights would reveal something new. They did. The man had turned his head. His gaze aligned directly with the front window. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but something about his posture felt wrong. Not confused, not curious, just flat. The security monitor flickered with static for half a second. The camera pointed at the lot glitched. When the feed returned, his posture seemed slightly different, though I couldn't say how. That's when the familiar medic voice in my head, assessment mode, kicked in. Hypothermia, drug intoxication, mental break, or just a random loner in the wrong place. None of those explanations eased the feeling crawling under my ribs. At 1:03 a.m., I thought about calling the sheriff, but he wasn't trespassing, and I knew how ridiculous it would sound. "Hi, there's a guy standing still outside." So I worked. I stocked shelves, cleaned counters, refilled coffee, but I kept looking up. Still there, still facing the store. At 2:20, the back corridor lights flickered. I checked the breaker panel like Dana showed me. Everything worked fine. The flicker returned anyway. Short pulse, almost like a warning. When I walked back to the counter, something in the window made my breath hitch. The man was no longer under the distant lamp. He was closer, standing near the trash cans, maybe 20 feet away. I hadn't heard footsteps. I hadn't seen movement, just there. Suddenly, he didn't press closer, didn't gesture, but the distance closing without motion was somehow worse than if he'd sprinted. For a long minute, we just stared. Him blankly, me frozen. Then the screen glitched again. Static. And just like that, he was back under the far lamp, as if he'd never moved. The supply truck arrived at 3:40 a.m. The noise cut through the stagnant anxiety like fresh air. Luis hopped out, cheerful as always. "Long shift?" he joked. I nodded toward the lamp. There was a guy out there, just standing. Luis squinted. "Where?" We both looked. The lot was empty. "No one now," I said. Luis didn't force conversation. After the delivery, he patted the counter and told me to stay safe. His headlights disappeared down the highway. Silence returned. A stillness that didn't feel empty. It felt observed. When 4 o'clock a.m. finally came, relief washed through me. I grabbed my bag, clocked out, and pushed open the door. The cold hit harder than expected. My car sat only a short walk away. I took 3 steps, then froze. The man was leaning against the hood, one hand flat against the metal, head tilted slightly, not toward me but toward the store windows, as if listening. The world narrowed to heartbeat and breath. My voice cracked out before I could think. Back away from my car. He didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge I existed. He just slowly straightened, like someone waking from a long winter. He turned his head, not fully, just enough for his eyes to skim past mine. They weren't vacant like I first assumed. They were aware, intentional, cold. Some instinct I hadn't felt since ambulance nights cut through my panic. Get distance. Now. I stepped backward until I was inside again and locked the door. He didn't chase, didn't threaten. He simply moved backward into the dark, step by slow step, until he vanished beyond the lamplight. I waited 30 minutes before going back outside. When I finally forced myself to touch the hood, the metal was warm, unnaturally warm, exactly where his hand had rested. My engine hadn't run in hours. After that night, the job changed. I parked under the front windows. I kept pepper spray in my pocket. I checked cameras constantly. I asked Dana, as casually as possible, "Ever notice glitches on the parking lot feeds?" She nodded. "Sometimes. Blame old wiring." I wanted that to be the truth. For weeks, I watched that far lamp the way someone watches a bruise, expecting it to spread. Sometimes the bulb flickered in a pattern, not random, not constant, like something moved beneath it. But I never saw him again. One night, a sheriff's deputy stopped for coffee. I forced myself to ask, "Ever get calls about people hanging around the lot here?" "Tall guy?" he asked immediately. My stomach tightened. "Yes," he exhaled. "Seen him a few times. Always gone before we get here. Doesn't talk, doesn't trespass." A pause. "Doesn't seem right." "Who is he?" "No idea." Before he left, he said something I wish I could forget. "If you see him close again, don't speak. And don't let him get near you." Time passed. My routine steadied, though the job never returned to feeling normal. I never stopped checking the far lamp. Most nights, it stood empty. Some nights, I swore a faint shadow hovered just outside its glow. Not a figure exactly, more like the space around one. Sleep became unreliable. I stopped trusting silence, not because it was dangerous, but because it reminded me he might return. One morning, after a long shift, tired and off guard, I glanced into the rearview mirror. The highway behind me stretched empty. But for a fraction of a second, I could have sworn there was a figure standing under a lone lamp far in the distance. It wasn't clear. It didn't move, but I knew the shape. I snapped my gaze forward and didn't look back again. People ask why I still work nights. Truth is, I don't know. Maybe routine is safer than change. Maybe running doesn't help when something already knows you exist. Or maybe a part of me waits, not hoping to see him, but needing to know whether he was ever meant to leave. Some warnings don't come with explanations. Some presences don't want anything. They just watch. And sometimes, that's worse. Listen to the instinct that warns you before your mind finds reasons. Not every danger shouts. Some simply stand still and wait to be noticed.